Welcome to the SURDS how-to video for SURDS file errors. In this video we are going to talk about after you've submitted your SURDS file and some errors have been generated, how to interpret those errors, how to resolve those errors, and how to get your file down to 0 errors so you can sign off on it. So first thing we need to do is get into the website, surds.colorado.gov. If you're not familiar with how to log in, go check out the video on logging in and password recovery. We're going to talk about errors in SURDS, and before we get to this slide here, let's go to the website, and you can see I've already logged in. If we want to scroll down for these examples, we're talking about the degrees granted file, and what I'm going to look at here is one of the submissions. We're going to look at full year 2011. We're going to go ahead and click on those 6 errors to bring up the error summary. And if you're looking at this summary here, there are 4 sections. The first section is the errors section, and those are what I call showstoppers. They will prevent you from finalizing your file and signing off. You have to get your errors down to 0, so they've all been handled on your end, the institution side, or on the department side. So there's a couple ways to handle these errors, but the first thing is, before you do, you have to figure out why the error is being caused. The second section is warnings. Warnings are similar to errors, except they won't stop you from signing off on the file. They're mostly to kind of point you in the direction of the possibility that there are some issues with the file. One example of a warning is to flagging students that are out of the ordinary in terms of being young or being old that are not common. So we have a warning in there that flags students that are 14 and under or above 80. Just to kind of point to maybe the possibility of maybe a date of birth is being reported wrong, and just want you to kind of review those and confirm, is it true? Do you have a student that's this old or this young? Just to make sure that we're getting the most accurate data as possible. The temporary warnings category is has errors in there that are not currently errors. So we flag this validation to look for certain types of validation where maybe we're going to implement this in the next term or the next year, and at this point in time it's not actually going to be an error, it's something we're going to enforce later on. So we put it in the temporary warnings category, so that way we have the code in there and we can let it run and kind of see how many institutions and how many files it's going to affect, so then when we actually upgrade it to an error later on, then we kind of have a better sense of what's going on. Other temporary errors are maybe some research that we're doing to try to identify how many errors are coming in for a particular type of validation, and maybe it's not something that's actually in the field definitions at this time. It might be something we're trying to see if we can filter out through a validation. So sometimes it's testing and sometimes it's a sign of things to come. And this last category here on the error summary is the overrides. And we'll come back to the override section here in a little bit. All right, so back up to the errors. On this particular file submission, we have 2 errors. Now, before we go into the detail of these, I'm going to go back to the PowerPoint and just discuss this. When you see an error generated on the file, yes, it is that showstopper that prevents you from signing off, but it's basically pointing to a problem in one of 2 major areas. So either there's something wrong with the source data, something in the database or in the system on the institution side, or secondly, it could point to something on the DHE side that is incorrect in the process. So within the source data, that could mean 2 different things. It could mean if we have an error, and if we flip back to this, and for example we see this gender is invalid. If we click on this and we come in here and we see that it's showing a gender of 3. Well, what that could mean is maybe there's just something wrong in the source data. So if the first thing you want to check in here is what exactly is this flagging. And if we click in the gender category and it says 3, the first thing we want to look at is, well, is this a valid gender code? And we're submitting a value of 3. So if we want to find out if that's a valid code, and if you're not sure, you can click on this little piece of paper icon. It's going to take you to the field definition. So you click on that, and it'll take you to the field definitions. I'll scroll down a little bit so you can see that. for that particular file for that field. And so in here you can see that a valid code is a 1 for male or 2 for female. So if those are the only valid values for gender, then we know in our file that a value of 3 is not correct. So we know it's something on the source side. So it's something that the institution did on their side. So now they need to determine, well, is it something that's actually in the database, their student information system, that has the gender code stored in such a way that points to some other code? You know, maybe they don't have it stored as a male or female. Maybe it's you know, an other category or something like that. So it could be something that needs to be modified in the student information system. Maybe they need to go in there and update that record to show that this is a female or this is a male. A second scenario that could happen on the institution side before that file is created is maybe the student information system does show that student in their system as a female, so the gender looks okay. So maybe it's in the process of converting however that gender value is stored in the institution's database, and it's the conversion process to create that text file. So it could be something in that transformation that created that value of 3 that needs to be adjusted. So those are two things in the source data. It could be the actual data and it could be the file creation process. Now, secondly, we need to consider if the error could possibly be on DHE's side. And in this particular example, the way we'd want to look at that is the lookup values and lookup lists. So if we're looking at that error, if you were looking at this file, and in this case, gender is not the best example because we already looked and valid gender codes are 1 and 2. But let's say this was a different example, and in fact, let's go back to our error list. And let's use this next error as this example here, the 1101 program code invalid. So if we're looking at this error, and if you're not familiar with this, a program code is a SIP code, a program code. The sequence number is an extra identifying code that goes with the SIP. And then degree level specifies what type of degree that they earn, whether it's a certificate or an associate's or a bachelor's, and so forth. So if you're looking at this data, and let's say we're looking in here, and these are SIP codes 140101, sequence 00, and then degree level 21. And once again, if you're not sure what these codes are, and you know degree level 21, you don't remember, you can click on the field definitions, come in here, and you can see that a 21 is a bachelor's degree. So let's say we're looking at that data, and we realize, you know what, this is a valid SIP. We offer that, and you look up the student ID, and you go confirm, yes, they did earn that degree, and it's in that SIP code, and it is a bachelor's degree. So you're basically looking on your end, and you say this is valid data. It was correct in our system, it was generated into the text file correctly, and then it was submitted. So the problem clearly lies on the side of DHE. So that could be two different things. And we'll go back to our PowerPoint here. Two places that the problem could be in the DHE data is firstly in the lookup values. So in a lot of these validations, when you submit a file, the individual column is bounced against a lookup table to look for valid values. And for gender, you know, it's looking for 1 or 2. For ethnicity, it looked for certain codes, and student level and degree level and tuition classification. All these fields, they have their own list of valid values that are looked up in the validation. So it could be that you're submitting a valid code, but DHE does not have that code in the validation. And going back to our example here, this is a perfect example of that. Because DHE bounces off these degrees that are given, and it goes against a list that we have for each institution, it's very possible that if this is a valid SIP code that was awarded, it's possible that DHE just doesn't have that list, that SIP code attached to this institution. So the way to verify that is to go up here, and this is for this particular case about the degrees. You go up here and click on this Approve Degrees link, and for your institution it will automatically pull up the list of degrees that we have. In this particular example, because I'm using a test college, we don't have any degrees, so nothing is listed. And actually, you know, the first time you submit, it's possible that we wouldn't have any degrees for your institution as well. So just confirm to make sure that your institution is in this list and select it. and then see what degrees pop up. And you can see which ones are available. So if we're looking at this, we could see that we have no degrees for my development college. So if we're going back to the errors, you're going to see that DHE needs to update their information. So we need to communicate with them and tell them that we have these SIP codes and we do offer these degrees, and get DHE to add these SIP codes to their list. And then after they add those program codes along with these degree levels, then the next time you submit this file, the errors will go away as long as DHE has added these to the list. So that's an example of DHE having lookup values that don't match or are incorrect, essentially. So things need to be adjusted on DHE's side. So that can be handled through communication. And one last place that the error could be in the DHE code is in the validation code. When these files are submitted and the validation code runs, there is a lot of SQL code that happens for each individual column, and it goes and validates for various different rules. And it's possible that this validation code is just not coded correctly. Maybe there's just an error in the way it's the logic of the validation code. It could be that the validation code doesn't need to apply to your institution, or it's being applied to your institution incorrectly. So it could just be something in the actual code. So again, once that data has been confirmed at the institution to say it is correct, we know was put on the file correctly, then we can move on to the other possible scenarios as to why that error is being generated. So it could be one of those four things. And so we've seen two examples between the gender error and this SIP code or this program code error to show you how sometimes it could be on one side and how it could be on the other. So what you want to do is make corrections, however they need to be corrected, whether it's on the institution side or working with DHE, and make those corrections. Modify the source if necessary, or have DHE make changes to their system, resubmit the file, have it get revalidated, and you keep working like that over and over until the errors get worked down to zero. And once the file has zero errors, then you're ready to review the file summary reports and sign off on the file. And for more details on reports and signing off, check out our other SURDS how-to videos.